Time has expired. Now recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McCord, I'd just like to start by expressing my agreement with my colleague here and my shared concern for the impact of the deficit on our ability to provide for our national defense. And that is one of many reasons why I voted against the Trump tax cut that provided millions for millionaires at the expense of our national security and ballooned the deficit to epic proportions. I think that your budget here strikes the balance right. I agree with your top line. I think that the administration is finding a way to balance the needs of the military with also the importance of diplomacy. As a Marine veteran myself, I saw every single day in Iraq the impact that diplomacy had on saving the lives of our troops. I align myself strongly with Secretary Mattis, who, as Mr. Trump's Secretary of Defense, emphasized how important it is to fund our diplomatic establishment, our more ammunition. Can you talk for a minute about how your budget supports our allies in Europe, meets the pacing threat with China, and balances all these things with the needs of the national security establishment today?
Thank you, Mr. Moulton. Let me start with China. As you know, we don't have the alliance framework of multilateralism in Asia that we do in Europe. So we continue to do a lot of bilateral. Example, and the investments that we're making in this budget are designed to keep us in an overmatched position versus China on the high end. I think a number of members have commented that what's happening in Ukraine obviously has lessons, depending how this comes out, for calculations that President Xi may make. We are very cognizant of that as well. In Europe, we've talked a little bit this morning about energy. I think that's a great example of sanctions, whether sanctions should extend to Russian energy and how much they should extend. There are something that you have to go together with your allies on. It doesn't work very well, obviously, sanctions that are unilateral. So I think that is something that is a good example of the steps that Secretary Blinken and Secretary Austin have taken to move together has been enormously helpful in Europe. I think many of us, you may have better foresight than I. Many of us were surprised and heartened how responsive the Germans, for example, have been on Nord Stream and on their defense spending increase, things that I think would not have happened had we not taken the time to try and bring everybody together. So I think that, as you say, these how we do this is very important, and we've tried to move together with and lead the pack.
Well, the fact that the administration has been able to coalesce our allies around this mission is actually quite extraordinary. And of course, Trump was working at cross purposes to that every single day that he undermined NATO. Thinking about the future, when I co-led the bipartisan Future Defense Task Force, we spent a lot of time thinking about how the department can get the best equipment and newest technologies into the hands of the warfighter at the speed of relevance. That means they need to get the stuff today. We can't wait till it becomes outdated. Do you think the DoD acquisition system is efficient enough to address these challenges and compete with China?
I think that all of us are looking for a way that we can be more agile but still be accountable and transparent enough. And your committee in the NDA created a PPB commission, so planning, programming, budgeting, and execution, which is the DoD-centric part of the larger federal budget process. That commission is now underway, co-chaired by a former comptroller and by a former AT&L or ANS executive.
That was my amendment, and I certainly hope it will be successful. I mean, one of our conclusions on the task force is that the system that we have today is not sufficient, that we have to reform it. But one of the other things we determined is that in the meantime, we can empower and reinforce the programs that are working. Deputy Secretary Hicks has openly discussed concerns with a shrinking defense industrial base, and the department has taken funding away from programs that are delivering critical capabilities, such as the Defense Innovation Unit. Now, DIU in particular has leveraged $25 billion in private R&D, introduced 100 new suppliers to DoD from 37 states in the face of a shrinking industrial base, and yet, shockingly, the department has cut its funding. So I agree with your top line. I agree with your strategy. I'm very proud of what the administration is doing in Ukraine, and yet I cannot understand why on earth you would cut the budget for DIU.
I'll have to get you a good answer for that one, Mr. Moulton.
Okay, well, I hope the
We
answer
have,
is that we will
I
restore
would just say
funding.
also that we have, as you know, Bill LaPlante just on board for a little more than a week, so we now have a full house in terms of our leadership in the acquisition and sustainment world to go along with Undersecretary Hsu on the R&E side to help move us forward.
Well, I certainly hope it was just an oversight, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, the gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize the gentleman